Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome back to another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around. It is week 69. And I don't know why that's an exciting number, but it is.
I'm so 12 years old still.
Hannah. Anyway, welcome to Cellar Door Skeptics and that wonderful intro from my co-host, Mr. Christopher Hanna. If we sound a little different tonight, both of us are a little under the weather. We both have worked probably almost 70 hours each in the last week and a half. And so we're probably a little bit more tired and a little bit more nasally than what we usually are.
That's an interesting verb, nasally.
It is. And so, but we still wanted to do an episode this week. We still wanted to come on and talk to everybody, though it'll probably be a little bit shorter as we only have 3 topics tonight. But
we can do 3 topics for hours and hours and hours. So
we could, but I'm going to restrict you. It depends, because we're going to see how long it takes before the NyQuil kicks in.
Oh, no.
And then when I start slurring and fall asleep on the keyboard, you know it's time to end the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'll have to reach over and push the button while you're drooling on your keyboard.
You will.
Yeah.
So tonight, we decided to reintroduce science because Hannah's kind of been a little lapse, and he hasn't even brought us any good science. So I reached out and found a great science article for this week, one that's a little bit older, but kind of has been talked about over the past year and a half, about bumblebee brains and can they solve complex problems. Very interesting idea there. We're also going to talk a little bit about the Michigan tax. Right? Because the Michigan income tax, because the Republicans, and I'm just going to say that broadly because I'm allowed to do that, right? It's mostly the Republicans, want to banish income tax. So we have a little clip from NPR that we're going to play, and then we're going to kind of dive into that topic. And we're going to end the show talking about Boeing. Is it made in America, or is it just basically another Trump company that he's now pushing down our throats? And we want to look at some of the similarities between Trump's businesses, Boeing's businesses, and is it really going to make America great again? And because I said that, I can use that as a tag for the show now.
Oh, no.
But before we get too far into the episode, make sure we remind everybody about upcoming segments that we have. We're going to be talking with Glenn Tipsbergy from the Rational Politics Project. We've got Chris Watson over at Podunk Polymath Podcast coming on. We're going to be talking to a socialist about Marxism at the beginning of March. And we have officially confirmed the debate for Hannah's first actual debate.
Yeah.
He is going to be debating a friend of ours, Aaron Furlong, on evolution. And I don't even know what the actual evolution topic is. Maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about what you'll be debating him on.
Well, we're basically going to break down the entirety of evolution. So what he did when you debated him on, I think it was God and goodness, is he just on a whim just slung out there the statement that evolution is a dead theory. And so I have never forgiven him for this, and it's just always just been something that irritated me. So we're going to do something. We're still ironing out all the details, but we've got a date, lockdown, and format, and we're going to just lock it in for if we're going to go very specific or we're just going to keep it really broad and general.
Yep. So send us a message on Facebook or email us at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com if you want to get a question on the air. We haven't decided if we're going to open it up to audience questions or not, but I think we're going to. It just kind of depends on how much response we get. So if you do have a question for either Aaron, who is a creationist who doesn't believe evolution exists, or my co-host here, Chris Hanna, about how evolution does exist, just send it over to us either on Facebook or you can email us at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. We would love to make sure we get your questions on the air.
Also, any questions that come in, I will not see, and Aaron will not see. Chris will hold on to them so that they're given to us both, as a first look type thing.
Yes.
So there's no any kind of bias or anything given to me or him.
Yep. So look for that. That is going to be the first week in April. We will have the live debate between Aaron Furlong and Chris Hanna, which will be Chris Hanna's very first debate.
I know. It's exciting.
It is. So let's actually get into the show tonight. So how do you want to, why don't you give us a little bit of an overview about banishing the Michigan income tax, Hanna?
All right. So I have turned into one of those people who listens to NPR, and I hear things that are cool, and I read up more about them. And just basically how my day goes. Just I flip through NPR, listen to heavy metal at work and stuff. And I've heard about banishing the income tax in Michigan, and obviously we have the conservatives have taken over almost everything all over this state. And this is something that's been batted around, and apparently they're getting serious about it. I think it's a terrible idea. Well, I mean, I'm the resident Bernie Sanders Democratic Socialist over here. Chris is we're both in different areas in the socialist ideals, but like we're both pretty comfortable with paying taxes and using those as things to better society in the state. And so when I heard they were removing it, I was like, oh, that's terrible. And then I listened to the MichiganRadio.org, and they had an awesome short spoken word from, it's Lessenberry. What's his first name?
Jack
Lessenberry. I had heard him a few times here and there. I recognize his voice, but this one, I was like driving, just mesmerized. It's really, really well done. And so we wanted to throw this in just as the hit you over the face with a shovel of what is really happening here.
Okay. So I'm going to play really quick the Jack clip, and then when we come back, we're going to discuss it.
I'm Jack Lessenberry. In Lansing, the Michigan House Tax Policy Committee was to begin discussions today on a proposal that most Republicans are ecstatic about. That would be a bill to immediately roll back our state income tax from 4.25 to 3.9% and then keep cutting it by 0.1% every year until it will be gone entirely. Well, completely getting rid of the income tax is a fantasy for 4-year-olds. Nobody takes that seriously except as a way to fool the voters. But they may well cut the income tax to 3.9%. Yesterday, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette joined the chorus of those supporting that. We must be a state that allows our hard-working men and women to keep more of what they earn and for the government to take less of what they make, he posted on Facebook. Those are nice, eloquent-sounding words. Who could disagree with that? The only trouble is that it's all utter nonsense. What a tax cut like that would do is blow a $1.1 billion hole in the state general fund budget next year, according to the House Fiscal Agency. That's $1 billion out of a general fund budget of a little over $9 billion. If it were to be passed and take effect soon, it could knock another almost $700 million out of this year's budget. Again, these are calculations made by the economists employed by the legislature, whose job is to report to our lawmakers the potential effect of their actions. Here's what that would mean. Less money for schools, less money for roads, for infrastructure repair, for fixing the pipes in Flint, for all the things that make civilization possible. But, according to the bill's sponsor, Lee Chatfield, and Michigan's Attorney General, it'll all be worth it because it will allow the common man to keep more of what he makes. Unfortunately, that's a total scam. The nonpartisan Michigan League for Public Policy calculated exactly what this tax cut would mean to people. The average annual income in the state is about $51,000, according to the marvelously named Department of Numbers. Such a person would get a tax cut of $82 a year. That's not enough to fix one tire destroyed by a pothole or pay for one credit hour at the cheapest state university. Bill Schuette, who makes more than twice that, would get a tax cut of about $300 a year. That would be pretty meaningless to him, too, since he's independently wealthy. But a venture capitalist or a medical malpractice lawyer making $1.5 million a year would get a cut of almost $4,000 a year. This is a mechanism to destroy state services and transfer money to the rich and leave the rest of us with chump change. Bill Schuette knows this, of course, but he's interested in winning next year's Republican gubernatorial primary, and he calculates this will sound good to those voters. Maybe so, but it would badly hurt most of us. I grew up with the quaint notion that we should be honest about what any proposal would mean to the people it affects. those trying to ram this bill through won't tell you. So, I just did.
Well, thank you so much, Jack, for telling us about what we could get back. But I'm a little excited, right? So they're going to reduce. I'm going to get $82 a year back or something like that. So I think we should celebrate, Hannah.
Clink. Oh, man. That tastes like black licorice. Ooh.
So, in all seriousness, though, I'm not excited about $82. I'm sorry.
No, and we're not going to go downtown and 81s and go, make it rain somewhere.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about this. So the concept that he's talking about here is reducing the income tax percentage level, correct?
Yeah, the immediate rollback. So the very first thing they want to do is immediately take it back from 4.25 back to what it was in the past at 3.9.
Okay. So
it's 0.35%.
So my first question is, if they want to roll it back, that obviously means less income for the government.
Yeah.
And before we get into that, though, if rolling it back, that doesn't make any sense because inflation goes up, right, every year.
Yeah.
Why would we roll income tax back? Because shouldn't our income tax at least go up proportionately?
Well, it's the percentage. So if inflation goes up and what you were making, let's say you made 50, with inflation the next year you're now making 52, but it's still the same weight of money. So like the 52 is now the equivalent of 50. Well, the percentage, the 4.25 or 3.9, it's still going to take, that same weight out of the 100, that same size slice of the pie. And so the percentage itself is really needs to be adjusted to whatever level makes the state fiscally run well. Like pay for everything that we need to make our lives good, which is the whole point in paying taxes, is making sure all of our infrastructure, all our schools, all the things that need to be funded, our water, everything is healthy and sufficient so that we can all enjoy our own pursuit of happiness.
All right. So logically, it kind of makes a little bit of sense if we wanted to get more money back. But what I'm hearing from you is that it almost feels like this dollar amount isn't worth the trouble.
I don't think so. And so they're talking about a $1.1 billion, tag on this out of $9 billion total budget. So we're losing over 10% of the money to use in the general fund to pay for stuff in the state of Michigan.
So hold on, before we go there. So if that's 10%, they're only talking about reducing it less than 1%. How does that equal 10% of a loss?
Well, the general fund isn't all of the taxes that Michigan brings in. But this is the general fund is just a place that we can move stuff around. And so it's useful. So like the gas taxes and stuff, those are usage taxes. Those go into specific areas. And the taxes are not the taxes, but the lottery winnings and stuff that don't go out to payouts help pay off schools. So like there's all kinds of different ways that Michigan pays for things. But as far as I understand, and not being a tax expert, that the general fund is basically a place that we can use for a lot of stuff. So when the governor sets up the budget, he can use the general fund to disperse and basically make Michigan run well, or try to anyways.
So in essence, you're saying that by reducing the income tax by roughly 1% to 2%, because of the way it's set up now, is the wealthier pay more taxes. By reducing it and basically essentially giving people refunds because of the higher end of dollars that people will be getting back on the high end, that actually is going to take more money out of the general budget. Is that correct?
What they say is for the $9 billion thing is basically the extra part of this. So what they say is they want to immediately reduce it from 4.25 to 3.9, but also they want, after it's there, they want to keep cutting it by 0.1% every year until it would be gone entirely. So no more income tax. And that's where they're getting that big number of the $1.1 billion. It says here that if it was passed immediately, it would be around $700 million potentially in this year's budget that would be affected. So that's the immediate initial for the state of Michigan would be $700 million. But once the income tax is gone completely, it's the estimate comes into the $1.1 billion.
Okay. And so that's
we're
a lot
get
of money.
$82. We're going to get $82 at our fund level.
But in the end, that $82 goes to help others. And the difference is people on the wealthy, this is an argument for flat tax, honestly, isn't it? This is an argument that, like, the beginning steps of figuring out how to make a flat tax.
Yeah, it's what it feels like. And this is an area, obviously, most of the time you'll find people in the lower levels that would be more comfortable saying, yes, I like the idea of, really, really wealthy people also putting 30% of their total yearly income into their taxes. Because, 30% is a massive hit for someone like me. And so if they get all their money at that really high end, they're only spending 15 or something. I believe it was Mitt Romney was at 14% for his taxes when he was running for president. So but he's worth, I don't know if it's hundreds of millions or millions. He's worth a lot. And so what I pay is disproportionate compared to what he does. And so this is the idea that the really rich people are going to benefit much, much more, in dollar signs, if the income tax is rolled back and eventually removed. They will see much more money come into their pockets than we will.
So in the ability to try to be fair and have a fair play, right, and have a fair conversation about this.
Yep.
If they did that, and let's just say it did cut that money out of the budget, where are they going to replace that money? That would be the whole point, right? So, and Trump talks about this a little bit too, and I don't want to diverge too far into Trump, but not really. But he kind of talks about the same thing where they talk about higher taxes, with product coming back in. Therefore, people want to bring, businesses back here because we're going to lower taxes. But if we brought all the businesses back and we didn't import as much, we wouldn't be making that tax dollars on the stuff coming back in. And so the same thing has to come from this. That money has to come from somewhere, right? Where is that money going to come from? If we're used to getting that income and we're barely scraping by as an economy, where else is it going to come from? Who's going to pay that money? Are we just going to start shutting services down? Is that what they want?
Well, I would say that Republicans probably do want to cut services. They like the idea that there is no such thing as a welfare state, and they definitely want the government as weak and small as possible. So, they're not really going to want to replace these funds as much as privatize these areas. So, the Michigan legislators that are conservative want to privatize our roads. They want companies to bid and basically.
But won't that make it so? Okay, hold on. So won't that make it so that we have to pay the companies to drive on the road?
Yeah, so there's all kinds of implications here. We have usage taxes and things that would be going into this. So there's a lot of areas where they can get this money from.
But if they did do that, so let's say they privatize the roads. Let's just throw this out there because this is a discussion that has come up before.
Mm-hmm.
If they're going to privatize the roads, that means we wouldn't have to pay the tax except for through the government, right? Or are we going to have to pay a usage tax through the company? So let's say...
I would say it's probably be tolls. So if it's privatized, that the roads themselves are not state-run, state-paid for, well, if this company makes the bid to get the rights to do this, how are they going to recoup their costs? They're going to have to charge you. And so either they have some kind of tracking system that when you drive, the chip in your car says, hey, you were on this road, so you owe us $3. Or they do tolls.
But essentially, so if the tolls go to the private companies, right,
mm-hmm.
then they can make money off of it.
I think so. I think that's basically what it means when they privatize it. So,
do you feel that they're going to be able to drive costs down, though? So, again, I worked for a Jan Sand company, and we sold trash can liners. And we used to have to bid for schools and for government positions and for different companies and stuff like that. We used to have to go in and present proposals. The state of Michigan, we picked up this trash can liner business for all the rest areas in the state of Michigan. Now, this is, 10 years ago, but we did pick it up. And at the time, we're like, holy crap, that's a huge amount of volume, right? How many rest areas are there in the city? They all have to have a minimum a couple cases, blah, 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 blah. And we had to go in and basically bid it at like a 1.5% margin.
Yeah.
Now, we figure you can make that up on volume, right? If you look at business economics and you look at the low level and you're looking at this bottom end, right? You can make money on selling high volume. Walmart's made fortunes on it. But we didn't take into account how many stops we had to make. We didn't take into account that we would have to FedEx these things and then pay FedEx. We ended up losing money on these trash can liners. Now, what that did, though, was that made us go back to our people and say, well, we're buying this we need you to sell it to us for cheaper because we're increasing our thing. In the long run of things, it was almost a wash. This was just a loss leader. And then we never picked up any other business outside of trash can liners. So, because, if we could have sold our proprietary, hand wash chemicals and our proprietary sanitation chemicals that we make 30-40% margin on, it would have been worth it. But they never picked us up because somebody else was cheaper. And the way the state did it is you submitted all your bids and they took the cheapest no matter who it was, and you had to service them. And so we lost money that year on trash can liners. So, from personal experience, I don't see how that's going to drive down costs for roads because they're going to make cheaper decisions on how to fix our roads.
Well, yeah.
Or they're going to increase tolls. And then in the long run, we're still going to pay for it. The difference is that we're going to pay it to a company that's going to take a profit, whereas in the government, they can't make money on anything.
Well, they're not supposed to.
Yeah, they're not supposed to.
We hear about people getting arrested and playing.
Okay, yes, but that's
that's rare, though.
Yeah, thank you. Like, let's not go down that bunny hole.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying is, if we've seen a model that works versus a model that doesn't work, why do people feel that we need to move down this avenue?
I don't really know why. I've heard a lot of the arguments. Basically, people don't like the idea of being taxed and stuff like that. The conservatives just don't like big governments. They think it's bad. All of the side effects of heavy taxation and welfare states and people mooching off the system and no incentive to work. There's a variety of arguments that we've all heard and we're all relatively privy to. But what I like is clear and uncompromising data. So, like, what do we have? We have states that had income taxes and they removed them. And how did they do? I've got a Detroit News article here. And this is conservative Detroit News article, by the way. Like, the Free Press is the liberal rag. The Detroit News is the conservative one. And I don't really like them much. But they talk about Kansas here. We should learn from these mistakes of instead of repeating them. 4 years ago, Kansas legislators cut their state income tax. And they initially celebrated it. Wasn't long before the state's fiscal foundation came crashing down. After the tax cut, below average job growth, economic stagnation, and perpetual budget crises. They had years of budget cuts. It says that if you just Google Kansas, you find 3 entries on the first page about their budget woes and failed income tax cut. Michigan wants to replicate that. And then the one that gets me is now they passed the largest tax increase in Kansas history to plug the holes created by the income tax cut. They will have the highest taxes in state history, with working families bearing the brunt of it. So, I mean, this is an example of a state doing what Michigan is proposing. And these are the results that they got. And it ends up being, as I suspect, the little guy, people at the bottom, the usage taxes, the sales taxes, whatever you do, it's going to hit the people at the bottom the most. You and I will see 3, 4, 5% increase if there's sales tax increases and that kind of stuff. But the super rich people, they don't need to buy 1,000,000 different things. So they won't bear as much of the brunt. And then obviously if taxes are increased, it's only a small percentage of their total income. So all these fiscal issues, it really hits the people in the middle and the bottom the hardest. And that's the reason why I think this is the problem. We have examples.
Yeah, well, and that's a fair analysis, right? I mean, think about it this way, right? If, for whatever reason, I made 4 times what I made, I would probably buy nicer cars. In all fairness, I would. I would be able to fix my house up more. I would be able to invest in my house.
But how many houses do you need?
I only need one. Yeah. And how big of a house how big of a house do I really need? I mean, do I really need a multi-million-dollar house? Probably not. I'm going to be more likely to save it so I can retire at 55 than I would be to retire at 60, or 65.
And you're not going to renovate every year. You're not going to renovate. And so you put 20 grand in, that 20 grand is going to disperse into a decade.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing with food. I mean, I have a very high food bill right now because we buy almost all fresh produce. We just do. Like that's what even through the winter, I do that. And so, again, I'm not probably buying non-GMO organic stuff. So I'm not buying even the super high end, but that's not far off from what I'm paying for food. But I couldn't buy any more food unless I was going to throw it away, and that's wasteful, right? My personality doesn't allow me to be wasteful in that endeavor. The only thing I could think of is if I had more money, I could buy fancier alcohol, but my consumption wouldn't go up. I wouldn't all of a sudden go, well, now I can afford to drink 5 bottles of whiskey a week, therefore I'm going to. That's not even logical. I may buy a nicer bottle, but I'm not going to buy 5 bottles just because of that. And so
in the end, the total amount of money spent that gets taxed is a little bit lower, even though you have more money. Like you're not the equivalent of 5 people. You're just one person spending a little bit more.
Yeah, and that's the point I feel you're trying to make is that if people were given the choice by everyone to do that, is it really going to? Are people really going to buy more?
If they get their $82 back.
Yes, because the problem is if you gave the lower income people more money back, and they were getting, let's say, the $300 instead of the $82, and the guy that was getting, oh shit, that's what we already have. Damn it. So if you were giving more back to the poorer people, they will invest it more. For example, right now with my tax return, we spend almost the whole thing that we get back. It goes right back into the economy because I got to fix my car or I got to fix my house up. Whereas if I were richer and could afford, some of those things, maybe pay a little higher tax rate, I still will have extra money in the bank to be able to pay that. So if you look at that, it makes no sense to reverse this because the pittance we get back isn't going to affect anybody on any sort of level to encourage economic growth, which is the whole point of eliminating the income tax.
Yeah, the big thing would be that the state is going to be easily able to either deal with the reduced funds, which I would say they're not, because they're saying that it'd take approximately $1 trillion to fix our water infrastructure just in Detroit and Flint alone. We're looking at massive amounts of money, and there's no way at removing this in a decade or however long, taking away $1 billion is ever going to make the state run better and make our facilities better. Like, this is not going to happen. And in the end, you take away these things, we're going to be looking at increases in taxes and other ways to replace this. Another example is Tennessee. They have the highest sales tax in the country. The volunteer state, they call themselves. They revile income taxes so much, the voters changed the Tennessee Constitution last year to forbid these taxes for good. Well, now they have a 9.45% tax increase on average. So, that's more than double the combined rate in a super touristy state like Hawaii. We're looking at this a good variety of examples where, these types of things, taking the income tax out is going to help people at the top. It's going to give them larger proportions back because of the percentage they pay. And the little guys like you, me, we're also still going to need to buy food. We're still going to have to buy whatever. It says the answer is all around you with how the state will pay the bills without an income tax. The food you eat and the clothes you wear, the gasoline you put in your car, all that stuff will just get higher taxes. And everybody, let's say, uses the same amount of that stuff. The percentage that you pay in your yearly income to those consumables is just going to go up. And that's where your money's going. Your income tax may not be as high, but you're still going to spend that money because the state has to have it. And what I see is this is a detriment overall to the state. They're not going to replace it very easily. And if they do, we're still going to pay it. You and I are still going to pay it. But the people at the very top are going to get the best deal. And I think the little guy should get the best deal. And so I don't think this is the way to do it.
Well, I would agree, Hannah. Mm-hmm. But you know me, so I'm a socialist in some aspects.
Yeah.
All right, so what we're going to do is I think we burnt that topic out. I think we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to promote a couple other things, suggest you go over and subscribe to us on iTunes, allow you to get a drink real quick. And what we're going to do is when we come back, we're going to be talking about bumblebees, insects, evolution, and how they can solve complex problems just like any other human. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Ishmael Brown, the HNIC from the Angry Black Rant podcast, and you're listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hey, all you listeners, I'm Robert.
And I'm Amy from Secular Yakking.
And we just wanted to let you know that if you've got 30 minutes to kill,
then we're the podcast for you. We're just some old married couple who's been yakking at each other over the many years.
And we thought we should start making it so you can listen in on our yakking.
We dig past the mainstream and bring you the news that you may or may not have heard about.
We take a look at politics, religion, science, and pretty much anything we feel like yakking about and sharing it with you. And let us not forget our weekly Mr. Potter Award.
No, we're not professionals on anything we talk about, but we love to yak about stuff and give you our opinion on the matter.
So tune in at secularyakking.com or check out our feed on iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and anywhere good podcasts can be heard.
And who knows what craziness will happen.
Yeah, just like this.
If you'd like to join the ranks of Patreons and sponsor the show, head over to patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics. For less than a 20-ounce soda or an energy drink each week, you can help sponsor us, the hosts, and our charity of choice. Patreon helps Cellar Door Skeptics create better content, become better activists, and it's going to help you stay healthier by drinking one less soda or one less energy drink each week. Click the link in the notes of the show to sponsor us today because we bring the discussion with the sources.
Hey guys, this is Wyatt Mathers from the Atheist Avengers podcast. You are listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for joining us again for this amazing, there I said it, Hannah, episode 69, his favorite number. And we want to give a quick shout out to the guy that does a lot of the music. A lot of the heavier music that you hear on this podcast is all from our friend Jason, and I'm going to butcher your name.
Como. That's how you say his last name.
Yep, from A Lost State of Mind. We throw the link right in the description. You can download his stuff for free. You can donate to him. Yeah, and he has a new album that's coming out, and that's why we wanted to talk about it, because he has a new album coming out at the end of February. And we'll actually probably have him on here middle of March again, just to kind of shoot the crap again and talk a little bit about what he does and why he enjoys making all this type of music. So, but we fell in love with his music the first time we heard it, and had to have it on the show, and there you go.
It's a riff party, man.
It is. You should see me and Hannah headbanging back here. Maybe someday we'll link up the cameras. You know, maybe if you go over to Patreon and donate $1 an episode, we could start throwing video up.
I still want to do the rock band episode.
Oh,
like,
we will.
We could do like karaoke or something. It's like, okay. And so, I don't know, like we could sing like Journey or something. Don't stop believing.
We will definitely do that, Hannah.
Oh, man.
It's coming. We just got to figure out the logistics. So just a quick reminder, we will be on a couple of other upcoming shows here in the future. We will be on Secular Yakking sometime this week. We will be on Skeptics Brew Pub March 27th. And we also have a spot on Utah Outcasts on April 1st. And no, it's not for April Fool's Day. Though maybe he's playing a joke on me. He's like, yeah, April Fool's, ha ha ha. Then I'll show up and, it'll be like, well, we're not doing a show tonight. But no, in all seriousness, we're on 3 other shows, so you'll be able to hear us, and we will post all links on the Facebook page and through our Twitter account. So if you are not following us on Facebook or on Twitter, please make sure you go over there and help support us that way by just hearing about the cool, amazing, fancy crap that we get into. So, but without further ado, I wanted to talk about science, because we talked a lot of politics. We have, and I probably sound a little drunk a little bit. I'm not really drunk. It's just that stupid medicine, that cold head.
Your nose is leaking.
It is. I sound horrible. I don't like the way I sound. But anyway, so I wanted to talk science this week, though, because we've kind of lapsed a little bit, because Hannah decided he's bored about science, and I have to get interested.
It's
You're
hard.
bored.
It's hard to research. Good, man.
It's not. It wasn't. This is this was fun. I found this topic on Reddit, and I was like, holy crap, do a little bit more research. I've got 7 links,
Bees, I think bees are our favorite insects.
Yeah.
We've talked about them a couple times.
We have, and we talk about them at home. My daughters talk about them, my wife talks about them, so it's kind of a thing. But what interests me the most about this article is there was a study done about how tiny bumblebee brains can solve complex problems. Now, most people would say, well, who cares, right? Why should we care about that, Chris? Tell us why anybody should actually care about bees and how complex problems they can solve.
Well, they're a simple creature. They're simple life. So imagine if we find the most simple but still complex creatures, we figure out how their brains work, or that they can do things that we previously thought were not possible for smaller and simpler creatures. Well, we're learning more about how the brain works, how things go, how cognition's formed. And on simpler creatures, it's easier to remove some of the variables. Like imagine trying to figure out cognition on a human. There's too much there. But if we can learn from simpler creatures like bees, and I mean, in the end, we're looking at better information, and hopefully we'll be able to understand ourselves as well as maybe save bees. I mean, bees have been under attack as far as hives growing and having enough to properly fertilize all the plants and stuff that we need all over the world. So, I mean, just more information about bees is a good thing, and more information about brains and how cognition and solving complex problems is. There's no loss of information here. This is all good stuff.
So the article starts off by saying this: understanding how the bee deals with these challenges, complex problems, will help investigate how a tiny and much more simpler brain generates complex multitasking behaviors, as well as how the bee's navigational behavior evolved. So what's again, we go back to the point. Well, the whole point is if these simpler beings and these simpler species can, evolve to have complex multitasking behaviors set up, that kind of leans us towards, well, maybe humans did evolve, which kind of will lean into a debate, and hopefully Chris Hanna is going to use some of these articles in his debate with Aaron, because I'm going to be very happy that he used my research to, not my personal research, but my discussions to talk to him about.
This is a year and a half old, but this is still pretty cutting edge stuff. I would say that they probably haven't gone a million light years ahead over this. This is pretty cool.
They've been studying this since the 90s. Just so you know, this is not like a new revelation in science. This is not something that was super groundbreaking, but what they've been doing is slowly picking away at this and talking about the socialization of bees, because that's important to any culture. And they've slowly been talking about understanding how bees' brains handle complex problems. And the whole big issue with this is that, the researchers found this. They found that these new skills can spread socially and culturally from bee to bee. Well, what does that happen in here? Think about how our children learn. They learn by watching you as a parent. And so, kind of makes you think, when, my kid was 1 year old and I said the F word, 100 times, a minute, and now I'm, 20 or 15 years older, and, my other daughter, I swear, like once every 2 days. Well, okay, that's a stretch, but, once every 20 minutes. She's probably picking up less, swear words, and it makes you kind of reflect on, as a parent, how you can help train your children and use the RAS to make sure that they grow up to be decent human beings.
I'm much more surprised that bees basically have the ability, kind of like to spread information, to pass on skills, like to culturally. Like this would be basically like me teaching you how to read specific mathematical formulations. Like, this is not so much, okay, a bee, the only way it can learn something is to directly experience it and to, trial and error, learn something. Well, this is saying that they were able to find ways that bees could communicate, essentially teach something to another bee. That is complex, man. That is like, okay, here's a simulation or something in the world, and here's something I figured out. Use this tool from now on. It's like Link. You take this and you'll be safe. I mean, this is really, really far fetched, or to me at least, it's far out there as far as what I thought bees would be able to do.
Yeah. So what the article, the first article that I linked in there is from PLOS. And that's
plus.
I know, but I like to say PLOS.
It's like a play on plus one, like plus one.
Yeah, and they have their own blogging site, and so they wrote an article. And again, this is a little older article, but they talk about a research team called Chica, and his research team, and he is a behavioral oncologist at Queen Mary University in London. And he says that the new research that was reported by him and his colleagues, that they said they got this big surprise, right? They found that bumblebees could easily be trained to pull strings for sugar water, right? So now we talk about lab rats, and they do this all the time, right? We see lab rats do these different things. We hear
crows.
about this. Yeah,
crows
and crows.
recently have been really a murder of crows solving problems. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And they talk about other species like, other apes. Apes do these different complex things. Well, now we're able to train bees, and all they're doing is through some sort of reward system. So
yeah, positive reinforcement. Would you like something good? Do this thing, and you'll get a prize.
So the first thing that they talk about is the researchers attach strings to blue disc with sugar water in the middle, and then they let the bees learn that these fake flowers held a reward. So then they also took the flowers under plexiglass, only for very few tips of the string within each of their reach. This was the first test to see if the insect would pull the string. So they were tempting these bees, by putting these strings there, wetting it a little bit, getting them to acknowledge it. They said with training, these bees were able to solve the puzzle and basically pull that string and get what they needed out of it. Now, I don't know if that's a bad thing. If you could train all the bees all of a sudden to pull strings, I think they would stop pollinating the earth and we'd all die. I think that would happen. So that wouldn't be a good outcome of this. But what they're doing is they're helping to retrain them, and then they're testing it to say, okay, if we train them, what will become of this? Where will we go with it? What are they going to do with this? They said the researchers also found that this new skill spreads socially and culturally from bee to bee. Now, we think about this. How do bees have culture? I don't know, but they do. They're a hive mind. Bees give up each other. They do all sorts of amazing things for each other. He says, after watching trained bees demonstrate their string pulling, they call it prowess, 60% of the untrained bees solve the problem on their own. Now, that's huge.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. So by adding one single trained bee to the colony of untrained bees was enough for many of them to acquire this new skill.
So that's basically learning from visuals. So basically, let's say you're teaching a child something, and you're teaching them how to use a tool, like a wrench, to fix something that's broken in your house, or a hammer. They watch you, and then you give them the tool. Okay, your turn. Go ahead. You don't tell them how to do it. They just watch you, and now they know how to do it. They see you do it. Bees apparently can do that. Yeah. That's awesome. That's complex behavior in my book.
Think about it like this. I mean, and I don't know, maybe this is a personal experience for me, but, when we were growing up, we always used to deliver papers on Sunday. That was like, we went to church, then after church, we went and delivered papers, and then we went out to eat after that. And essentially, the delivering the papers paid for out to eat.
Were they Chick Tracts?
They were not Chick Tracts. They were actual, they were like, I don't know, they weren't the New York Times or anything. They were just like local gazettes when we lived in Ohio. And that's, again, this is back in the day, in the 90s when print was still a thing. Because I'm saying this, and then, 20 years when we're still doing this podcast, we reference this show, and they're like, well, we don't have printed papers anymore. That's ridiculous, Chris. Well, back in the day when I was a kid, we did have printed papers, and it was a thing, and we made money off of it. Not a lot, but we made money.
And it was uphill both ways to deliver those papers.
No, it was not, actually. But more than one time, my mother had a van that had a tire that got a flat. Because, again, you drive more. You put more miles in your vehicle, you're going to have more flat tires. Well, I remember I think I was 9 years old the first time I changed the tire. And my dad did the same thing. He showed me how to do it. He pulled it off. The second time, he did the same thing. Showed me how to do it. By the time we got to the third time, he's like, okay, it's your turn. Here you go. Well, you tell me what to do. No, I've shown you how to do it. Now I want you to turn around and do it. Now, I'll tell you, that's a very valuable lesson because I've changed probably about 100 fucking flat tires in my life here, in all fairness. And that was a very valuable lesson. And then I thought about it, and I was like, every time I change a tire, I've never made my kids watch, so now I got to do that.
Oh, man.
Now I need to go do that. But anyway, you think about it. Humans can do those things, right? The whole point of the story is humans we're training our kids that way. And if other species are doing the exact same thing, it says one of two things. The brains that are being bred in these different species have the ability to have the cognition the same way we do, at least for multi-purpose solving of problems.
It's a surprise. It basically would elevate, I guess, cognitive abilities, at least, of the rest of the animal kingdom in my book. I mean, these aren't little automatons. They're not little robots. These things can actually learn stuff. We talk about super smart computers. You can't just show a computer how to change a tire and it'll figure it out. I mean, we're still a ways away from being able to do something like that. So artificial intelligence, as smart as it is, probably still not as smart as a bee, which is, I guess, relatively astounding.
Yes, and it's just what that shows is that the brains can evolve.
Yeah.
And they can evolve to do more complex tasks. They said the results of this study suggest that learning a non-natural task in bumblebees can spread culturally through populations. So think about it. If we were to, let's say we wanted to retrain bees to deliver honey to different plants. Let's say we wanted to breed, let's say we discovered a new type of plant that provided twice the amount of oxygen, right? So as we're cutting down millions and millions of trees to make frickin' paper and houses when we could be using hemp, we could be replacing it. So if, let's say we did discover a new tree that allowed 20% more oxygen, if we could train the bees to go to those places first, in all essence, we'd be able to increase our oxygen output a lot faster, right? And it would make up for the loss that we're having through the loss of all these different trees. And maybe we could train a way to help reduce pollution or these other things through introducing new types of plant species into our environment. Now, obviously, those all have faults. I mean, there's always going to be something bad that could happen from that because it's evolution, right? It's not perfect.
Well, it's creativity. Just looking at new ways to solve those problems it's always interesting. And there's another direction you can take of it with training bees and bugs and animals and stuff like that. Is if you think about not so much making the bees like, okay, you are going to go to this kind of tree and take the pollen and pollinate all of these. Well, what about doing something the other way around? And we understand the bee brain better now. And we have a better idea of what makes their culture and their everything function properly. Well, maybe we can stop colony disorder and colony collapse. Let's say we'll make almost 98% of bee colonies thrive instead of having problems with die-offs. Well, yeah. I mean, this isn't even specifically directed towards any, like, a tool that bees specifically train them to go do one thing, but just keeping their cultures and the species healthy, it would be considered a good thing in my book.
Yeah. And in all fairness, then, I don't know if you've seen the Black Mirror show, Chris, but the last episode, spoiler alert for those who've never seen Black Mirror, but the last episode of season 3, they actually have a bee episode where basically the whole world has replaced bees with drones because they had to, because that was what was happening. And then somebody took over and used it to kill a bunch of people. Well, if we could save the colony collapse, we never get to that point, right? We never have to worry about that.
Yeah, then we don't have murder bees.
We don't have murdering bees.
So I was thinking, like, if we talking about training bees, it's bringing together a little bit of a supervillain feel. Like training bees just seems like something that like a supervillain would do. Is like, no, I will take over the world with my army of bees.
So as we wrap the segment up, one of the other things that one of the other articles talked about is that this is not an unknown phenomenon. Now, them being able to use these experiments has just enhanced some of the older research. So there was an older study that I looked up that says this. This says one of the most spectacular examples of social learning occurs in the honeybee dances. Inside the darkness of the hive, successful foragers display a series of stereotypical motor behaviors which inform other foragers of the precise location of floral food up to several kilometers away from the hive. Now, how does this relate to the other ones, right? That's a natural bee evolution inside of their complex minds. All we are doing is taking it one step farther. Now, let's look at what happened with the human race, right? Or the human species. Sorry. Look at what happened with that. How did we become better? And we've had these conversations on this show before. Other episodes, we've talked about this things. We were able to spend less time chewing our food, because we can cook it, right? We were able to spend less time, gathering and hunting all these small nuts when we could kill another animal and eat its, meat and grow stronger.
Evolved. We went from grunts and charades to pictures on the walls, and then we moved to language.
So what it did is it allowed for our specific brains to develop faster because we had more time to focus on it. Well, now we're at this learning curve where we can bestow this information on other species. And I'm not saying we should go, we shouldn't have Planet of the Apes. We shouldn't just enhance monkeys to the point where they could take over and it'll turn around and they'll enslave us all, right? We don't want that. Not yet, at least. We might even have a monkey already in office. He's kind of orange. Anyway, I'm digressing. Sorry, but in all fairness, though, if we're able to socially enhance other species to help them grow faster, and we're able to influence this, why would we not? Because all we're doing is taking evolution into our own hands in some aspects and accelerating the timeline for us. So instead of it taking 1 million or 2 million years for bees to evolve to the point where they can repopulate the Earth, we're going to use it so that they can stop the colony collapse, like you said, within the next decade, so that we don't have to create artificial bees. Because the best thing would be is to create a natural intelligence that allows for all species to continue to survive. Because again, we don't want heat death, and that's kind of where we're headed.
Well, if we learn more about all these species, like let's say it's a success with bees, and we move on to another species, and we move on to another species, and then we take care of entire sections of the animal kingdom. I mean, we're essentially getting better at living as either using part of our ecosystem or becoming a better part of it. So let's say this teaches us more about animals. We trust bees as a little bit higher intelligence as opposed to just, like I said earlier, automatons, just little robots that are just our beck and call. Well, they can solve problems. They're pretty smart. These types of things, just learning more about the world we live in, that bees can communicate through these amazing cultural traditions and things they can pass on. Like, this is just enhancing our understanding of the rest of the world. And clearly and simple, and hopefully we can use it to keep ourselves becoming extinct. Because if anything's going to happen in the near future, it'll be humans destroying the planet enough to the point where we disappear, and then the planet will get back on to doing whatever it is it does.
Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.
That's pretty apocalyptic and a way to end the segment, but why not?
Yeah, well, Hannah wants to see humans destroy the race. I don't know. That sounds pretty... That does sound really dark.
It's too easy. Humans can destroy.
It does. But without leaving you on a dark note, we do want to take a quick commercial break, because when we come back, we actually have a rather longer segment for the next one. We're going to talk about Boeing and how Trump is really just using it as a guise to help and better his cause. Because we're going to look at whether Boeing's even really good for America, and if we even see that it making America great again.
Hi, this is Sharon Bush, newest and most badass host of the Unbuckling the Bobber Belt podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
I'm Dustin.
And I'm Wesley.
We host the Atheist Nomad podcast.
We're godless geeks who take a skeptical look at
politics, religion, science, technology, and history.
We also interview leaders in the atheist, skeptic, and humanist community.
Check us out at atheistnomads.com.
That's atheistnomads.com.
Considering how you want to help Cellar Door Skeptics, head over to iTunes or your favorite podcast app and give us a rating, because every rating helps push us in front of new listeners. And since our main goal here at Cellar Door Skeptics is to provide the most accurate information possible, we hope that more ratings will mean that more people get to hear the topics that we're presenting. We don't insist that we get a 5-star rating, but Hannah's favorite number is 5, and the more gold stars he gets, the more special he's gonna feel. So what do you say? Head on over to iTunes or Google Play, give us a rating, and help engage with Cellar Door Skeptics today.
This is Deborah McTaggart, the voice of Beatrice Johnson from Atheist Apocalypse Podcast, and you are listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around through our first 2 segments, because we talked about Michigan income tax and how Hannah thinks we should get rid of it. And then And then we talked about bees again for like the third time in a year and a half.
Bees are the cellar door official animal mascot, maybe. I should make a meme or something.
Well, you should be like, bees represent cellar door skeptics.
And everybody would be running, screaming, they're in my hair.
They are. But we wanted to talk about Boeing and how they're made in America, but they really don't represent America or American values. And I thought this was interesting because Hannah brought this, and I was like, this sounds boring. I'm sick of talking about Trump. I'm sick of talking about all these other things. I'm sick and tired of, having to deal with him wanting to make America great, but not actually doing it.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Basically, the Boeing thing for me is I've seen meme bouncing around from time to time about the Boeing Dreamliner, the new replacement, the workhorse of the 747 is being taken to the airplane graveyard to be disassembled by people like the guys on MythBusters, and we've got this this plant that Trump went and visited, and he's come out saying, this is great, this American whatever, and saying like make America great again by bringing back American manufacturing jobs and that kind of stuff. Well, what basically the new Dreamliner is not entirely 100% made in the United States. Actually, a surprising amount is not made in the United States. Like components are shipped in from other places all over the world, and then they're assembled here. So there's a bit of a difference between how good both of those things are, whether or not we're making the more difficult and complex components or if we're just assembling them. And so that's basically my first reaction to this was.
And that reaction makes sense, right? Because, and we talk about it, and it's kind of funny because the company I work at, and everybody who's listened to the show before has understood who I've worked at before. I work for Steelcase, or a contractor for Steelcase, right? And it's kind of in the same thing. A lot of the parts used for chairs aren't made in the United States. They're made elsewhere, imported in, and then assembled. So in this analogy, it almost kind of feels like Boeing's doing the same thing, right? I mean, they're bringing in outside pieces, assembling them in a facility, and then selling them.
Yet Trump is basically touting this as just all America company that was like, Henry Ford when he first built the Model Ts. Like, he wasn't buying anything from anyone. That was all sourced in U.S., all American materials, American steel, American everything. Well, in this new day and age, like with globalized markets and the globalization that even though they're trying to end it with isolated American economy, we still see with the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, their new crowning achievement is massive portions of this plane are outsourced. So essentially the forward fuselage, the cockpit, and the tail fin and the aft fuselage, so the head and ass of this plane are U.S. made. Everything else, wings, the body, the engines, all of the controls in the wings and the access doors, everything is all outsourced and brought in and assembled here. Now, percentage-wise, the total value of the plane, I don't know exactly what that is. I've heard, and this is just what I'd heard, was around 40% of everything value to the total plane is brought in from other places, or that was the amount the U.S. did. So that was just a number that I'd heard. But in this image, it looks like, those are two important parts. Obviously, the forward fuselage, the cockpit, would be the most important. But in an easier comparison to this is just something that brought to mind Robert Reich's movie Inequality for All. Is they asked the people in an audience that were watching Robert Reich speak, and he asked them with the little voting things they had, is where do you think the money goes when you buy an iPhone? And there's a list there's 5 countries that people could choose from: Japan, Germany, South Korea, the United States, and China. And 70% of the people said the majority of the phone goes to the United States. And in China was number 2. They think, because we hear this, everything's made in China. All of Trump's hats are made in China. Well, in actuality, the money for the iPhone at the time of this movie was created, when this speech was given, 34% of the phone's money goes to Japan, 17% goes to Germany, then 13% South Korea, 6% to the United States, 3.6% to China, and then 2.7% goes to I can't read other. And so Japan and Germany, surprisingly, get the majority of the money for every made phone because they make the chips and the hardware. And China gets a relatively low amount because all they're doing is assembling the pieces. And this is the biggest thing for me in this comparison is the United States is assembling most of this plane. So we're not making it. When you look at, to me, a manufacturing society, it's not a bunch of people on an assembly line putting stuff together. This is innovators and people who are creating, making these really complicated stuff, leading the innovation in chips and stuff. U.S. used to do that. We used to have the best educated workforce in the world, and it's changed over the last couple of decades. And this is what I see when I see Trump touting Boeing as this great American company, and I see them assembling planes made other places. To me, it's a contradiction.
Well, yeah, and it's kind of funny because, I'll be honest, I didn't watch the speech until we had to talk about this. And one of the things that has come up as a big conversation piece here is Obama. A lot of presidents have all gone to the Boeing facility, right?
Yeah.
This isn't a new thing.
Well, they made Air Force One.
Yes.
So
this is not a new thing here.
No.
And so Obama talked about, this is years ago, but Obama talked about, and I guess we're not that old, but whatever, Anyway, Obama talked about how we have to find smarter ways to innovate because what's happening is technology is taking us past the brink of just simple manufacturing jobs. Trump is touting he's bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States.
From 1960, maybe.
Yeah. The problem becomes here, we could bring all the jobs back. But what he doesn't understand is that because it's going to cost that much more, companies are going to figure out a way to automate these things, which is what Obama predicted. And we're going to find that all these super complex things are the only things that we'll be able to retain, which requires better education, more innovation, not these low-end manufacturing type jobs that we used to have. Yeah. Not even service jobs. I mean, just if you think about how you can assemble an airplane, and I can relate it to, I had a friend who worked for Oshkosh, who basically made military vehicles for the government. And you know what his job was? To screw 4 bolts into a frame for every unit.
Man, that sounds boring. I think we talked about this at one point.
We probably did.
Yeah.
And that's what his job was.
I'm the super bolt man.
Yeah, 4 bolts. Now, I'm not saying we should replace him with a robot. Not advocating that in any way, shape, or form, right? Unless we had basic income, blah, 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 blah. If we had basic income, that would fix that. But that's real socialist to me, so I'm not gonna take us down a socialist tangent. But what I am saying is Obama was telling us that, look, you can't just bring manufacturing jobs back because in the end, it's not going to work. And so Trump may be able to, for let's say even 8 years, bring assembly manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. But what's going to happen when technology eventually increases to the point where they can't do that? And Japan or China or Indonesia or some other places like, okay, well, we could buy a robot for this because we could pay our people this amount. We can afford to buy people that can service these things, and they're going to outproduce American labor in assembly. At some point, we're going to be faced with the choice again under a capitalist system to reduce costs, to increase the amount of the dollar for that organization. And so it's an illusionary thing that Trump's trying to claim here in saying that, oh, we're going to bring all these manufacturing jobs back. Well, no, you're going to bring assembly jobs back. And as you pointed out, half of the crap that goes on this airplane is not even American. We're importing it because it's cheaper to make it somewhere else, import it, and let us assemble it.
Or maybe we can't even make it here. Maybe our manufacturing force is just not as good as it used to be. There's a variety of reasons why we would go other places. But in the end, what we're looking at is Trump is trying to bring back, oil, coal. I call it their romanticists. The romantic times when America was great. Well, so basically you mean right after World War II when America was like 90% of the world's manufacturing because Europe was basically a pile of stones. Well, I mean, you can't bring that back. You're never going to bring back the golden age of American manufacturing in that dirty, rusty, or the Rust Belt times and greasy hands and men on the floor. Like that's not a possible future. That's an obsolete technology. And Trump is the kind of person who's not going to innovate. He's going to try to bring back that stuff and hold on to it as long as they can. And eventually we will be surpassed. And that's what I'm worried about when these guys are touting manufacturing. They're touting it in the wrong way. As a manufacturer, I do things that are the old way because very few people ever actually do it this way anymore. It's cumbersome, but there's still benefits to it, having the kind of freedom that I have. But I mean, in the end, I will have to completely and totally mechanize almost everything I do in order to ever be cost effective. And I know that. I accept that. And Trump is trying to hold on to the old way as long as he can. And by touting Boeing as being, a company that's the old school, I think he's essentially, waving a flag over our faces on this one. And it's incorrect what he's trying to do. And so he's talking about Boeing in these planes, and it's kind of a contradiction there, just as the all-American plane. Well, even more so when I first thought of Boeing, it reminds me of GE as tax dodgers. And this is from Bernie Sanders' Senate page. I read this when he was getting ready to run for president. In 2008, 2013, while Boeing made over $26.4 billion in U.S. profits, not just gross, profits, they received a total tax refund of $401 million from the IRS. Boeing's effective U.S. corporate tax income rate over this 6-year period was minus 2%.
Holy crap.
So this is just like GE, who doesn't pay any corporate taxes. Boeing is essentially a corporation that is, they're massive welfare corporation. That's what I like to, and Bernie also likes to call them that. It's just, they outsource tens of thousands of decent paying jobs to China and other low wage countries. They buy from other countries, and they don't pay their fair share in taxes because the tax system allows them to do that. They have lawyers who will find the tax loopholes. Just their CEO made $23.3 million last year. I mean, this is the billionaire buddy of Trump. That's what I see. This is the boys club, and they're just kind of patting each other on the back. That's what I see when Trump speaks at a place like Boeing.
Yeah, and let's go back to, the infographic of where all this stuff comes from, right? The infographic talks about where everything is and how it comes in. In essence, they want to talk about an import-export type tax, right?
Yeah, tariffs on all those plane parts.
Yeah, it's just going to increase the cost of that plane.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And true logic, if we break it down to the bare minimum, all he's going to do is saying that at least a minimum of 30%. And I'm going to, the infographic makes it look like more like 80%.
Yeah.
But, one article I found said 30%. So we're going to take a conservative line and say 30% of that's going to cost more. 30% will have a higher tax rate to organization. Where do you think they're going to do pass that on to? Do you think they're just going to absorb it and say, I'm going to make less?
Yep. Nope. The investors are going to take less dividends, and all of the money that goes to all the shareholders, they'll take a cut because they understand that the lower wage Americans really deserve that cash money, right? Or am I in bizarro world?
I think you're in, well, I don't know. You would think you're in bizarro world, but you're not. And that's what's crazy. And I know you talked about this a little bit, but Boeing received a $30 billion contract from the Pentagon to build 179 airborne tankers, right?
Yep.
And then they got a $124 million refund from the IRS.
Mm-hmm.
So not only were they able to increase their margins by billing them for $30 billion, they also made another $124 million from the IRS.
Yeah, so really, does that company need our tax dollars back? Do they need any of our money? It's incentivizing them to continue to want to work for the government, but this is giving money back in welfare to people that don't need it. This would be like giving Donald Trump free college.
Yeah,
there's no point.
And so, if we took the numbers in this article that you have from Political USA, if you took the numbers and you got rid of tax havens, they would owe $66 million, right? In federal taxes.
Yep.
So let's where's my phone? Let's bring a calculator out, right? Let's do this. So 66 million. That's
a million or billion?
66 million. So we're going to take that, I don't know, and divide it by 52 weeks. That's about 1.269 million. divide that by, I don't know, let's say 10,000 people. You could bring 10,000 jobs back, right? Or 5,000 jobs back at a minimum wage for that money that we're just giving away.
But they took that money and they distributed it amongst their shareholders after getting a huge government contract job, and that would be enough to fund 5,000 minimum wage jobs.
And that's without even looking, at the profit they've made off that. So what we're doing is we're watching corporations get larger. We're watching corporations take and be able to invest in themselves. And I can even look at my company this way, because all companies do this. If we pick up a big contract like we just did, we could take that money and reinvest it in the people, or we can go out, and turn around and invest a minimum amount and take the rest as a profit share.
Just reduce the costs of the stuff that we have to buy. It says 2010 they paid no federal income taxes, but they got $124 million back. So now, think about that. If you or I spent no income taxes and we got money back, it doesn't even have to be a lot, but just if we pay no income tax and the government was like, listen, you didn't pay any, here's $2,000. What planet are they living on? This is the reality of big business in the United States. This is why people call the United States a corporate state. We are essentially becoming an oligarchy or a plutocracy where a few either corporate interests or rich people have much more freedom of speech than the rest of us.
Yep. And what they're doing too is Boeing has eliminated 57,000 American jobs since 94.
Man.
57,000 Americans have been put out of business by Boeing, and yet they're getting $66 million in tax-shore credits, offshore tax-shore credits. $66 million. But yet we have 57,000 people who lost their job. So we could run all these different maths, right? We could run all the maths, and we could say, that's how many people. We talked about 5,000 people. So we would only be able to save some of those, 5,000 of those jobs. But that would be 5,000 more that didn't go in the pocket of somebody else. And that's for 1 year. Yeah. So if you average that out over, I don't know, what's 94 to 2017, that's 17 plus 6 is, you're not doing live air math. Look at that. I don't know what that is. So
over 20 years. It's over 20 years. So I mean, a couple years pass, and so 22 years. That's we're looking at a big chunk of time.
So 22 years times 66 million is just outrageous amounts of money. And so
it says here that says amount of corporate welfare, at least $58 billion in whatever time scale that they have for the total amount of money that Boeing has gotten.
So if you run the calculations, and again, these are just raw numbers, folks, but 57,000 people lost their jobs in 22 years. If you take that, that's roughly about 2,500 to 2,600 people a year. Well, wait, didn't we just say that we could create 5,000 low-paying jobs at $66 million a year? Oh, guess what? We can double that and put them in the low end of the middle class and be at almost the same outcome for that $66 million.
Mm-hmm.
So we could create 2,500 middle class, low end middle class jobs a year for what they're taking in offshore taxes, and yet they turned around and they eliminated them out of the United States. Now, you honestly sit here and tell me how that's making America great again. How? How does that do that? You're making stockholders great again. You're making corporate offshore funds and CEOs great again. Where is the American people in this?
It's the boys' club. I mean, if someone said it's surprising that Donald Trump is becoming Donald Trump is using the presidency and all of the power that he has to enrich himself and his buddies when he was a billionaire guy who was hanging out with rich people. I mean, this is not a surprise at all that corporate people use their own corporate interest to enrich themselves when they're given positions of power. This is one of the reasons why we have to have regulations. If you think about it, if we didn't have any regulations, do you just expect the banks to do the right thing? No, because we've shown that people don't naturally act consistently altruistically. It takes a little bit of, hey, listen, this is the way society has kind of decided that you need to act. And if you don't, here are some negative consequences. But if you take that away, that regulation away, this is the way big corporations act. If you give them the power, they look to make themselves and get as much of the pie as they can get. I can't think of a better example than a company like Boeing, just doing everything they can to take everything they can. This is not an example of a company that is making America great. This is an example of just a giant corporate entity that is now a global company putting together stuff in the United States. Really, that's what I see.
Yeah. And what's ridiculous, Hannah, and I'll be honest, I'm very astounded by what people are accepting, and everybody listening to the show knows I'm a big Dan Carlin fan, though I disagree with him immensely. And you and I actually talked about this a little bit earlier, and it's kind of funny because it hasn't come up in a while because he hasn't had a show in a while. But I'm for an outsider candidate. I was for Bernie Sanders. Aggressively for Bernie Sanders. And I had to switch my vote to Hillary when I didn't get another choice. And I'm not saying that because I don't believe in third parties. I'm saying that because I don't associate with Gary Johnson at all. At all, except for his pot
I forgot
thing.
all
I'm
about
okay.
that clown.
I'm okay with legalization of drugs. I just think we should tax the crap out of them, whereas he doesn't.
Yeah. He's a
and
deregulation guy.
I think Jill Stein doesn't understand enough about politics to actually run the country in any sort of manner. So that left me with Hillary, and I don't think Hillary is a good choice personally. I don't think she was what would move the country forward, but I think she would stop it from moving backwards. Like that's the nicest way to put it.
Yeah.
And when we look at this here, and we sit down and we stop for just any sort of second and look at what they're doing, they're not going to be able to make America great again. And Trump isn't understanding what it is. What he's doing is he's trolling people. He's tapping into those of us that you and I that are on the different side of the fence, who are watching our pensions disappear, who are watching poor companies make poor decisions based on capitalism and promising false hope. He's promising this falseness that we're going to make America great by bringing manufacturing back. Well, good. You want to bring manufacturing back? Get rid of all of the crap that Boeing's doing and say, no, make your plane 100% here and assemble it. When you can do that, then you can start talking about how you're bringing manufacturing jobs back.
Or innovate manufacturing. So instead of just bring back the old style jobs, create new jobs, create new markets, new materials, new batteries, whatever it takes to be the leader in these different financial areas and different material areas. Like talk about China spending $300 million, I think it was. And they said they're going to create 30 million green energy jobs. And they're making a green city with absolutely no fossil fuel oil controls and powers or anything like that in it. Like the United States used to be the country that was innovative and the leader in that kind of stuff. Not so much anymore. And we need, companies like Boeing to invest in its people to make a better airplane and make it here. I mean, if that's what they want to invest in manufacturing, that's what it takes. It takes innovation. And I don't think we do that. We're trying to sit on our haunches and make money.
No. We've become the country that turns around and we outsource the hard labor part and import the technology part, right? We're not even on the innovative side. We're not investing in our school systems. We're not investing in these. How many kids want to leave? How many people want to leave the country and go to other schools outside of the thing? Not just because it's fun to go travel other countries, but because there's other education values.
Yeah, DeVos is going to chase away any of the Genius Grant
you're going
kids
on a
from the
tangent.
H-1B Genius Grant that we used to give, and we still do, for people of other countries who want to come to the United States because they'll get the best education in the world. Basically, in the end, we talk a lot of trash, about China because they pay their employees slave wages and the corporate kings who benefit, and that all their people do is do low-tech, mindless assembly. So like that made in China should just simply say assembled in China. But the U.S. is looking closer and closer like that. If you ask me, like the way our jobs are, we don't pay anyone anything. It's minimum wage as much as possible. And economic inequality is getting as wide as possible, and the people at the top are doing what they can to keep people uneducated. In the end, we need to change the way we do things here, and I think the Trump presidency and what he's touting from Boeing is going to exacerbate those problems as opposed to help heal those issues and move this country forward in a positive direction as opposed to just purely greed driven.
Yeah. And the amazing thing of this, Hannah, here is that Trump tapped into that minority, right? That's almost to the point where they're like the Joker, right? We got to burn the city down. We got to burn this money because the goal is chaos. Because by burning the money, we can demonstrate that we don't care about money. We just want to watch the world burn. And at some point, that's almost kind of what Trump feels like. He's like, I got all of this stuff. I've got all of this money. I've got all of this power. I'm just going to try this out. Ugh, I tried this out, and what else is there to do? Because if you think about it, you're not going to bring millions of jobs back to manufacture when you're importing everything. You're going to bring millions of jobs back to assemble. And at some point, somebody's going to fix that and assemble it cheaper than you can. And where is the money going to go? Where are the capitalists going to go? Where are the companies that you're giving tax breaks to going to go? They're not going to be here. They're not going to stay in the United States. At some point, no matter what tariff you put in place, they're not going to care. The Matic, Steelcase, none of them have brought their manufacturing back here. You know why? Because they don't sell the majority of their profits in America. They sell them out where? So if they don't sell all their money in America and all their products in America, the majority of them, why would they bring it all back here? Because they don't have to pay an import tax. They don't have to pay any of that because they're not importing it back in. They're sending it around the world. So unless your consumers are going to go up here in America, and if you don't pay us more, we ain't going to consume anymore. Without consuming more, we can't buy more. Therefore, manufacturing here is pointless. Your tariffs become pointless. It is what it is, folks. Thank you so much. Have a great night. And remember, prepare yourself for the revolution.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.